right now. And we are live. I can't believe this is episode 20.
It's episode 20. I'm using my other webcam. I was just talking about that before we started recording. It's weird. So you can see, it's a little bit more fisheye. You can see my half my body and the whole of my room, my living room / office space, which is, anyway, temporary office space because I have a desk that I use mostly to put paperwork on, and it has my printer and it has a pile of paperwork in the waiting to be filed section.
How big is that section?
It's I don't know. It's a mess. And the other section is half semi-filed. I sorted some stuff out. It goes in a pile in the cupboard of the drawer of the desk. Waiting to go to the next section along, in which I elaborately will one day punch holes in them, and they'll go in my actually more permanent files that are in binders. It's a very sophisticated system.
It's very sophisticated. like your t-shirt.
Yes.
T-shirt today.
So now you can see my whole t-shirt. It's weird. So obviously, upon on just classic French, Parisian, Toulouse-Lautrec style art. I can't remember if it's Toulouse-Lautrec or somebody else, but it's the Theater of the Black Cat, Le Théâtre du Chat Noir, is a famous poster from 100 years ago, is itch. You can find it everywhere in Paris. You can buy it. There's masses of copies. That doesn't ring a bell to you?
No.
Okay, so instead of the Theater of the Black Cat, Le Théâtre du Chat Noir,
it's like Attack of the
Ninja Cat. Attack of the Ninja Cat de Très Haut Somme, which comes from also nowhere, because cats and ninjas are popular. Awesomeness is kind of popular, you could say.
It is.
Mixing French and English is kind of popular. I mean, I think awesomeness is, I don't know if it's really popular, but maybe, I don't know. So we're doing this in the afternoon. Do you think we have more of your students watching? I changed it at the last minute. I'm sorry, but
we might. I don't know. We'll see. Check your comments, because
actually that's true.
I posted the link to my Instagram, so maybe we will.
No, I'm the one watching. I have not been promoting anything on social media because I've generally been mostly avoiding social media. I don't not look at all. I've said I wished a few people happy birthday on Facebook, but I've mostly.
So is this a conscious thing?
Yeah,
it is. That's good.
Well, I have been busy. I have been busy with a bunch of other stuff this week, and in the past few weeks, I'm just there's too many bad news going on in the world that I'm slowly keeping in touch with, but I'm not liking what's going on social media in general, so I'm just avoiding it.
And is that your usual mug?
Yeah, pretty much.
Except this time it's tea.
Yes, this time I have a lime and ginger green tea.
Oh,
and it's one of my two or three usual mugs.
Now, I don't know if you've seen this t-shirt. Have you seen this t-shirt?
I don't think so, no. Botsky and Branham Ludovico technique?
This is...
I don't get the reference.
It's a Clockwork Orange. So there's the eye open.
Oh, right. Okay, that's... Okay.
Yeah.
I was just talking about Clockwork Orange with somebody this week or last week.
Such a great book as well. Amazing book.
We were talking about somebody who played a song from the it was a few weeks ago. We were in the car for Halloween with friends, and he had a Halloween playlist including one of the adaptations of the Clockwork Orange version of a classical song that I can't remember which one it is right now. It's a super famous one. A classical piece.
Beethoven's
it must have been Beethoven's Fifth.
Yeah.
That is kind of electronic musically minded and played in Clockwork Orange.
Oh, wow. Well, the film's good. I saw the film before I read the book. I think the book is amazing. It's
I've never read the book. I've seen the movie ages ago, but I've never read the book, actually.
It's a really short book, and I'm not drinking coffee. I'm drinking Coke Zero.
It's still caffeinated.
Of course. But it's a bit late for the caffeine.
The angle of this camera is so weird. It's a bit late, so there's less light, and it's better definition, this webcam. Which is why I bought it, but I didn't expect that it would have such a wide angle. It's just weirded me out. But anyway, let's just go with the question.
So today's question.
Yes, which is one of my students' questions.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And it's quite a long one.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I think you'll find it interesting. So the
All
question
right.
is, how can I work with someone with whom I have nothing in common, who thinks nothing like me, and with whom I have no feeling? Need help.
That's great. The help is coming a little bit late because I think they wrote that 2 months ago. I'm sorry, it's not
It's an
funny.
old question, right? But it's a good one.
It's something that comes up a lot, right? And it's going to keep
Oh
coming
yeah.
up. It comes up at school, comes up in your
Yep.
place of work. In
Yep.
your place of work, it's like if you get any kind of job, internship, you're going to not like everybody. Did we talk about that a little bit last time? Maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway,
We
okay,
have
repeat
before.
again the question, please.
Yes, there's a few bits to it. So
Yeah, because this is a good one. It's a very
yeah, it's
good
a really good
question.
one. How can I work with someone
Yeah.
with whom I have nothing in common, who thinks nothing like me, and with whom I have no feeling?
This is great because so I'm immediately thinking. So I spent a bunch of time with the same class of students. So these students are master's students that are master's degree students, but that who are studying marketing communications, but who
Mm-hmm.
have not studied marketing communications for their bachelor's. They're coming from other humanities.
Oh, okay,
So
that's
they're new
interesting.
to communications marketing, and I'm coaching them. Actually, I'm not really a teacher. I'm coaching them, which is also, or at least it's my reason for having spent quite a bit of time with them, um, supporting them. So I'm
Beyond
coaching
the
them.
classroom.
Well, I'm not actually one of their teachers, so all of my involvement is beyond the classroom. I do have some set times for coaching, but most of my involvement is actually in messages. So I'm interacting with them a lot because I give them advice, I give them coaching on two programs specifically. One is one where they're set up as mock agencies. So they're like pretend advertising agencies where they're meant
Mm-hmm.
to apply everything else they're learning in class,
Mm-hmm.
working with a real client. So I'm organizing that. That's where I do have like set coaching times and sessions with them. And then another one where they have a year-long personal research project to write like a memoir,
Wow.
and I'm supporting all of them individually. And there's 30 of them. So actually
That's
27 or 28 are doing the
that's a
memoir.
lot. That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it's very interesting. I have a lot of things I could talk about offline about this particular side of things. But
But you can
as
be
in
very
personally
hands
to you,
off. You can be very hands off with that kind of group of students, I think.
yes and no.
Okay.
But you could also be very hands on, and I'm quite hands on at the moment.
So the
Anyway, to accelerate a little bit, I've spent a bit of time with them updating stuff in the channel and on Teams because all the remote work is happening through Microsoft Teams right now. And many of them had questions about setting up for their the topic of the research that they're conducting. And I also had a conference and a talk in a series in an event going on around the school called International Days. So I ran a series of workshops on similar concept, and I've been talking with a few of them who had similar challenges about the idea of problem definition.
Oh, okay.
So
Yep.
defining so I'm going a bit from a very roundabout way to begin with,
Yep.
just so,
Sure.
I mean, well, it's the idea of the show anyways. There you go. And it's on my mind big time right now. And I have been teaching this to the other students I have in
Wait,
class, and
hang
I've
on.
been working
Are
on
you
this for
saying
workshops.
are you saying that problem definition is on your mind, or collaborating and working well with others on your mind?
Problem definition, and I'm going to
Okay.
roundabout come to collaborating with
Working with
other
others.
people.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have been looking at how do you define and transmit the idea of what a problem is, or so problem, question, challenge, opportunity. Those are just the same thing. How do you define what there is to be done? That's very interesting. Well, both it's a communication problem, whatever the kind of communication you want to do. Human beings have an innate assumption to think that whatever's going on in my mind is very clear for you, which I think belongs to the
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger effect. I
Yep.
think it's a little bit related to the Dunning-Kruger effect, on overestimating the amount of stuff that is clear for you. I mean, it seems to be in the same world. But I'm sure there's stuff in Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow and cognitive biases, generally speaking. and it's a vehicle in any kind of most professional settings, very, very clearly creative communication settings, where you have formalized ways to detail what is it that needs to get done and how to pass along that information in what's called a formatted kind of brief.
Yeah.
So I started digging into what is a brief, and the first element of a brief is detailing what needs to get done. And how do you detail what needs to get done in a way that really is rich, makes sense, is in actionable, and because we tend to, and I say we human beings in general, because of our lazy thinking, and that's like back to thinking fast and slow,
System 2, yeah.
and because of biases of all kinds. One, I don't have time. I don't like all sorts of circumstances and reasons to make the problem broad. In the case of communications, marketing, etc., it's like, well, my problem is I need to sell more stuff. She's like, well, yeah, that's every single problem. That's not, that doesn't help, because that's what everybody needs to do.
Yeah.
Right. In the case of these students, are helping them like, well, how do I work with somebody else is a similar kind of question. So I'm going to keep just digging in a little bit more and coming back to the actual question.
Cool.
And as I said, we also tend to think about, and I'm just repeating it to be very clear, we tend to think that whatever's in our heads is very clear for others, except that what's clear for them, it's what's in their heads. And if you're not clear about what you're communicating, what you need to get done, then you can't be disappointed that it doesn't happen the way that you want it. But in order for that to happen, you need to be clear about the thing that needs to get done in the first place. And more often than not, we're not clear about what needs to happen because we're not clear on the situation, etc. And I was helping my students a lot on defining. So when they're a problem, defining a problem. A problem is two at least seemingly opposed forces coming to clash together.
That's a problem.
That's a problem.
Wow, okay.
That's the definition of a problem.
Okay.
If you go look at the dictionary and Wikipedia, that's the definition. Two things are coming in play that clash.
Okay.
So the first point is to be very clear about what is clashing, because we tend to not be clear about what is clashing or what the problem is. So in the case of I don't have anything in common with that person, one, I don't think that's the real problem. Or is that the problem? Or if it is, how is it the problem?
Yeah.
Because all my students need to, all the students I was talking to this week need to define a specific topic formulated as a problem within the communications industry as a whole. So it's a communication problem. And just, it was helping ones go, well, how people should be, it was something like, I'll paraphrase, or should I change it entirely? Well, I guess it's not a secret, it's fine. How can companies that are, I'll paraphrase into something close, but not exactly what the problem was. How can companies that are greenwashing prevent or help people double check on consumers check on what their actions are to see if they're real or something like that? Which I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's not, so I had to like go in to do work to explain, okay, well, wait a minute, what is the problem here? What do you think the problem is? Is it because for the company who's selling products and greenwashing is allegedly greenwashing. Maybe from the company's perspective, they think they're taking steps towards a better environment and a better future and doing everything they possibly can.
That's what you mean by greenwashing, right?
Sorry, I should have specified that. Typically, greenwashing is a buzzword to talk about how companies would be advertising and marketing the fact that they're doing better for the environment, but they're not really.
Yeah. Like a whole, we're corporate.
But they're not really is an argument. It's they're not really is debatable because it's very complex questions.
I get it.
Or at the very least, let's say they do an ad campaign saying they've done something really good for the environment, and actually they probably spent a lot more money on the media for the advertising than they did on the something good. From the company's perspective, that's not a problem. That's what they thought they should be doing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, wait, what is the problem? So if you're working, so importance of defining what the actual problem is and who it's a problem for, right? Because unless you confront what that is, then you are going in a wrong direction to try to solve a non-problem.
Ooh, there's a double negative there.
Yeah, I know
Not only are
that's
you,
not the best thing. I don't
no, I know,
know.
but
I don't
not
really
only are
think
you
about that
going
in
in the wrong
advance.
direction, but you're spending energy on something that isn't even a problem.
Yes. Or so you're spending energy on something oftentimes that is not a problem for you.
Yeah.
So here's another one I had in mind earlier while I was walking. To bring it down to the classroom. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you're in the classroom. This works for both your students and mine, or any social group, work environment, whatever. While this person said something about me that is nasty, let's say, so it makes me look bad.
Yeah.
I've just learned through somebody else that apparently that person has said something about me. Okay, cool. Let's say whatever that person said is not true. You're very clear that whatever they said is not true at all. Whether that's a problem for you or not depends. I mean, I could say, well, everybody in the class really likes me. I know that person's just lied. Whatever their problem is, it's not mine. Clear?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I could say, oh, well, actually, they told that person that I really like who now doubts me, or now the whole class has a problem with me. Now that's a problem for me. Or for some reason, the opinion of that particular person matters to me. And in which case, you're like, okay, well, then that's a problem. But the problem is not that that person lied. The problem is that that person's opinion matters and they said something negative about me. So now I can like go and find out what that person said, rather than trying to convince somebody else entirely that, oh, well, no, I didn't lie about that thing. Because that's like spending energy in the wrong direction. Right?
Or because the other, from what you're saying, I'm thinking maybe the problem is what other people think of me rather than what that person said. So I'm thinking, how can I solve the problem of what people think of me?
Well, is the problem that I'm worried about what other people think of me? Or is the problem that that person lied about whatever they said?
It could be both. Because
it could be, but which one do you want to tackle first, right?
Yeah, this is really interesting because I see this all the time.
Yeah.
With students in school. Now they're teenagers, right? So they are obsessed.
That's why I'm talking about. That's why I use the example of that kind of social group.
Yeah,
it works.
They are obsessed with what everyone else thinks of them.
Of course.
And it's part of the growing up process, I guess.
Right. Like, yeah, totally. So let's get a little bit closer to the question now. So, so how can I? What is it again? Like, how can I work with someone?
How can I work with someone with whom I have nothing in common, who thinks nothing like me, and with whom I have no feeling?
Right. So the first interesting point is because there's a few different. This is really interesting because the fact that it's long and there's a few different points, like they think like nothing like me, da da da. So which leads you to think that that's the problem. But the first part of the sentence is how can I work with the person? Which is an interesting assumption that you would need to think like someone else, or be like somebody else, or feel good about somebody else to get something done, which is the work part.
Yep.
Okay, let's say I am chopping wood with somebody else. We both have I don't know, like just or classifying. We're punching holes into the paper that I have on my desk. Each one of us has a punching device.
Yeah.
What's it called? A punch hole maker.
Hole punch. It's called a hole punch.
The hole punch.
Right.
The hole punch.
Yeah.
This person working with me punching holes, I don't need to share anything with them for them to be able to punch holes with me as long as they understand how to punch a hole.
Yeah.
If they don't understand how to punch a hole, then we have a problem in the hole punching project. But I don't need to like them. I don't need them to be like me. I don't need to feel anything towards them for us to conduct and do this piece of work called like, let's punch holes in all these pieces of paper and put them in files.
Now, when you're saying this, I'm immediately thinking of how the economy was the Industrial Revolution, the industrialized kind of
That's
repetitive kind of tasks that first, in a factory. It
But
was
it's an interesting one because you think
clear
about that.
problem, clearly defined. I don't care
Yeah.
about anyone else. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And now, okay, the students in my class and most of the students in your classes as well are dealing with complex problems or more complex problems that need intuition, that need thinking, that need reasoning, that need interpretation, that have different ways to approach them, different ways to think about them. Sometimes no perfect answer, most of the time, actually. It's not math, right? Because again, math is very clear in the same way as the Industrial Revolution types of problems. So if we're working on a math exercise, we could disagree, but ultimately 2 + 2 = 4. So we're either right or wrong about that.
Hang on. Did you say 2 + 3? Because it sounded like you said 2 + 3.
No, I said 2 + 2. Sorry.
I hope you did. I was getting worried there.
Because that would be like, whoa, wait a minute, I missed
exactly.
something. I know, because I'm talking about this kind of like new type of math. I don't know what that is, but no, 2 + 2 = 4. As far as I know, I'm not a math person, so like my math analogies stop very soon. Like they don't go very much further.
2 + 2 is definitely 4.
Yeah, in most interpretations of the mathematics.
Let's leave it there before you get
Let's leave it there. Weird. We'll come back to that one. I'll have to study a little bit, but so again, like that list,
solving complex problems.
Yeah, so you could easily say, on the other hand, that it's actually a huge advantage to work with somebody who doesn't think like you.
Yes.
Because you have different approaches to how to solve that particular problem, which, assuming the work problem is clear, of the complex work problem. But it's probably not clear because the person writing the question has a problem with the fact that their other person does not like them. And so how can you work with them? One, first, and this is like the summary of everything we just said up to now, define what the actual piece of work to get done is. And break it down in simple, and then we can introduce the concept of chunking, which I don't think we've talked about so far in this show, or maybe, no, we did a little bit in our productivity stuff, I think, no?
Oh, we did. Yeah, we talked and that kind of stuff.
So go back to the stuff about, I think this is the productivity episodes in Deep Focus and maybe in the summer. But anyway, chunking is this idea of, like, if you want to learn or tackle something, break it down into smaller pieces, because otherwise it looks too big. So right now, it seems like a big challenge for this person or whoever to work with somebody who's not like them, doesn't feel like them, etc. Now, break it down, and where you want to focus to break it down is what is there to be done. And first, so
I think so. What you're saying is I think it's really useful, and it reminds me of GTD, getting things done, where
GTDs is like that, right?
Yeah, it's all about.
I've not read GTD, sorry, but I get the idea.
I think it's great. It's really all about define the very next action. Get very, very clear about what the next step is. So rather than saying, "Oh, I need to," I don't know, like so there's something for me, right? So I need to speak to my GP. That's not necessarily the next step. The next step is get the GP's number.
Yes.
So that's on one side of it. Being very specific about the problem really helps the action. But the other kind of darker side to it is, if we don't define the problem properly, then I don't have to be responsible for taking any action. It just becomes this big mess. And I see that in my school, in my institution, working with colleagues. Nobody wants to pinpoint what the problem is, or nobody wants to be held to account for what they have to do.
I would say we're not trained to do that either. We don't know to do that. Nobody teaches us to do that.
And nobody wants to be pinned down to what they're going to do by when they're going to do it, because then it makes it really specific. So I started on my emails.
Specificity is something I've been working big time with my students, and that's a general thing everywhere. Nobody understands that they're not being specific.
And precision is something I work on with my students too, being precise about what you're saying, because the examiner is going to read what you're writing. You can't be vague when you write an exam answer.
I was having a conversation with a student, just a side note, tangent. One of them on the topic, we were talking about body image. and kept using other vague words like category words, body image, body positivity, I was like, you need to be specific. Like, give me examples. What do you mean? What is your opinion? What are we talking about? She said, well, they're teenagers that having their body changed through plastic surgery. I was like, okay, now we're onto something. Now you're onto something. Now you're specific. Now you're like, this teenager at that point got their body changed through plastic surgery in order to conform to the body image they believe they should have. Now we're onto something. We have an element that we can address.
No, that's very cool. Too often when I'm practicing like an exam question with some groups, they'll read the question in I suppose it's like the problem. Like the problem is very clear in the exam. Here's the problem to solve, is the exam question. And they'll write down something about one part of the question without thinking about how the whole question fits together. Or they'll write something that vaguely relates to the question. They'll start off here and then end up talking about something that's not tied back to the question. They're not always referring back to the question. And you'd see that, I see that happen in my previous career where we'd have a brief to do this. And we end up doing this, which doesn't actually address the brief because we don't keep referring back to it.
It happens all the time.
All the time.
And it's part of my thing because I'm the strategist, and generally a part of my role is to define things like that. Now, whether they change directions mid-course because we find out actually there's a better way to address it, there's a better idea that addresses, that happens too, right? So it's not set in stone, but anyway, it works for those kinds of problem generation. So, and then you go down rabbit holes because of emotional attachment. And that person writing that question is down a rabbit hole because they're like, oh, maybe that person is like me. No, they're not like me. Oh, they don't, I mean, so you try, because it's normal. It's also human to try to find points of reference and points of commonality to see, okay, well, how are you like me so that we're going to be able to work together, which is totally normal. What we're talking about is counterintuitive. Just also to be clear about that.
Good point. That's a very good point to make.
Yeah. Intuitively, we go to vast generalizations. We go to broad terms. We go to buzzwords. We're afraid that being specific will box us in, but it doesn't. Being specific gets you to talk about real stuff that you can tackle. But also this other idea of specifying what the actual problem or the thing to do is, and the next action, as you said, and very clear, like breaking it down in very, very, very simple terms, also takes out the veil or the fogginess of emotional attachment. And emotional attachment, of course, is important with young people and teenagers. As you said, it's super important to be part of the group, to be in the in-group, or to try to figure out if you are or not part of the group with all the drama that comes around it. Drama is emotional attachment. I mean, it's like various parts of whatever your own flavor is and the flavor of that other person that you're trying to work with. So it's interesting because and we look in the wrong places. Looking in the wrong, I mean by that, the way the question is formulated feels like that person has tried things and they need help because whatever they tried is no longer working. But what they tried is not to go rationally look at what the problem is, to find points of commonality, which is the work of diplomatic agencies, international agencies, non-governmental organizations, people working in the United Nations. What their long, hard work is to eliminate emotional attachment, to say, okay, well, we've got a lot of things we don't agree on. We're very different people, but let's try to tackle this particular thing and see where we can make progress in bits by bits. They have to chunk and break everything down to be able to progress. And I'm not a specialist of international relations and diplomacy, but I'm very clear that that's part of the job. So, for example, I was talking with somebody about Amnesty International recently published a big round of research on police violence in France, condemning them, and published 60 pages of report. And I was talking to an acquaintance of somebody I know who was like, yeah, but they're not doing anything. It's like, I'm like, well, you got to understand that that's just not doing anything. Double negative again, sorry. It's very much doing something. It's not what you wanted them to do, but what they do is publishing extremely well researched diplomatic information to be able, because they in order to keep doing what they do internationally, they need to have access from countries who don't want to give them access.
Yeah.
And in order for them to keep having access to information or to doing research, investigation, in countries that arguably would be even worse than France on finding like how are prisoners treated, they need to have access to those countries. And in order to have access, they need to have agreement and be seen as neutral, diplomatic, etc., not going overboard, because otherwise they can't do their research or won't be able to inform anybody about what's going on. So that's their stance. Then other groups are more active. They're not diplomatic. They're like, that's just different kind of group. And in the case of the question that we're talking about, how can I work with this person if all these things are going wrong and don't work? I would recommend the diplomatic approach, because I also think in society that kind of works better. Sometimes I was going to go somewhere else. I was like, I don't want to condemn violence or say it's the right way to go. Sometimes it works to be violent. Now, hopefully in a classroom environment, you don't need to do that.
Okay, but
violent or any other kind of extreme way to approach that.
So when you say violent, do you mean violent with your language, or do you mean physically violent?
I don't know, both, I guess.
Because it's possible to be. I read Non-Violent Communication by Marshall B. Rosenberg, and
I heard about that book again. Somebody was talking about it. Actually, I watched a really great video of a doctor in France and a new movement that has been started called Re-Info COVID. So it's a bunch of people, mostly medical doctors, nurses, science researchers, epidemiologists, etc., who got together to start resharing information in a just calm, nonviolent communication inspired by that book, rather than the scandalous, crazy kind of like coverage that you have in 24-hour news that is basically designed to scare people. So they're like, all right, let's just do a little bit more, take our times, talk about our different perspectives, share information, like that. That video has been taken down. It was a really good, refreshing interview. Just very, very clear, very calm.
Oh my god!
Not the website where he is, but he was an interview he gave with somebody else on YouTube, and I shared the thing with a friend, and she told me, yeah, that I can't find it. I'm like, so I haven't double checked that it's taken down. So just to be sure.
Okay.
And I might even be talking about super edgy stuff that YouTube is going to cancel us for. But given we don't have a lot of views, they probably
then we'll have some notoriety, so that would be good, right?
Maybe, yeah. I mean,
but that
anyway,
book.
Sorry, I don't want to read that book.
It's really interesting book, because when I read it, I started to realize I can be incredibly vicious in my language, like destructive, violent in my language, and I don't even know. I never even thought. I never, like, oh, words don't hurt me, but like. It can.
Most of the time we don't realize that what we say is offensive, and even more so when you're talking about somebody that is not like you at all.
Yeah.
And that you don't share any common references. So yes, by the way, it was late in the conversation to say, the person having this question, it is a challenge. It's a real problem.
Yes.
It's tough. I don't want to like underscore or undermine the fact that it's a real challenge, and it's difficult to work with somebody that particularly that intuitively we want to see, like whatever your normal way to approach working together is in collaboration, there is usually some sense and version of sociability, emotional aspects, shared references, which we said, it's just another way to say it.
I've to give a more direct answer to the question, one of the things that got me into my whole self-development journey was reading the book The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
I've heard about that. I've not read it either.
So my first really great mentor, my first really, really, really great boss, he recommended it to me, and I read the book and I started trying out some of the ideas in the book. It blew my mind. One of the things he talks about in the book is integrity, like your word. Like he describes it as honesty is conforming your words to your reality. Anybody can do that because they can just lie, right? There's a kind of consistency between the two. And he distinguishes integrity is conforming your reality to your words.
Yeah.
And I was like,
That's super
whoa,
interesting.
that's really cool. So he goes this framework, but habit 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yeah.
And like the number of times where I've gone back to that and I've brought that to the classroom or whatever it is. And teaching is one of those professions where if you take everything personally, you wouldn't get through the day. You just wouldn't. You'd be like an emotional wreck after 2 lessons. So, because I've been in lessons where some pupil has had a massive reaction, like, and stormed out of my class because of something I've said or done, or I've been insulted by pupils. I've had all sorts of things happen in the classroom, and the moment I take it personally, there's no room for me to understand what's going on with that young person.
Yeah.
And the more I can start realizing it's not about me, it's about what's going on with them, and trying to understand what is going on with them, that they've had that kind of reaction to me saying, like, one of my favorite examples is a pupil will say to me, so I nearly got a C in the test. And then I'll say, so you got a D. And they'll get really annoyed with me.
Yeah.
I've stated a fact and they've got annoyed. And that's more about, well, what are they dealing with? Not me, not what I've said, not me being the teacher. So how can I understand what's going on with them and really understand, not pretend to listen because really I'm just waiting to put my point across. I mean, like, really understand what's going on with them.
Yeah.
And then, like, oh wow, I never realized that's what was going on.
Yeah.
And then suddenly there's a bit more room to collaborate. And everywhere, every single relationship with my parents, with my wife, everything, it just works. The number of times where I've just about to fly off the handle with a pupil or my wife, mostly my wife, because she's changed her mind. And I realize, no, she isn't changing her mind. She's thinking out loud. We process the world in completely different ways. I think in my head, then I talk. My wife talks, and that's her thinking. Completely different, totally different ways of doing things. So I think it comes back to, do you really taking the time to really understand someone?
Yeah. So that's
discover.
both to really understand someone and really understand the task that you have to do together.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, so just like slight parentheses, because it's not even a tangent. Well, I guess it is one, but
It is.
So yeah, I'm using this different camera and I'm noticing the quality is better, but as the light is going down, I'm looking even more and more pastier white. So I do promise you I have a tiny bit more color to my skin.
You actually become,
so.
Yeah, you do look a bit whiter. Or
Yeah,
maybe it's just because I'm really dark and brown.
It's the camera. I think it's the camera's adjusting to the lowering light and trying to make the most of it. I think that's what it is. I don't know.
Or you're becoming a vampire at night.
I'm becoming a vampire, but it's still daytime. It's too early for vampires. So, and here's another thing that I had thought. So everything that you said is totally the right kind of answer to the question as well. So understanding, getting clear about what the thing to get done is, and like away with some of the emotions, and really understanding the other person. And in the process of understanding the other person, listening to them, finding out what's going on with them. And in that process, it might be like, what you say about reading in general. Like, it's not that people don't like to read, they haven't found the book for them just yet. So maybe you just haven't found what the point you have in common with that person just yet, because all the stuff that you tried was what was obvious, but you didn't get there yet. It's possible.
And I think something with that, the problem, so much of my experience has been born of being different.
Yeah.
And because I like grew up being like a brown person with loads of white friends, my superpower is being able to talk to anybody about anything and being able to find a commonality. Because I've been doing it since I was 4.
Yeah.
I've become really good at it. And so is my sister. Both of us will do that. But I think there's magic where there are differences, which goes back to your point.
But you're also right. You know what? The other way around works really well too. If you have if you grew up and you stay within the same environment with the same people, you're not as good as doing that at all. So it's going to come across like a much bigger
Oh, really?
challenge.
Okay, I never
I
thought of
think
that.
so. No, doesn't it stand to reason?
I wouldn't know.
No,
Literally, I
I'm
can't
telling you, I've
imagine
seen
it.
it.
Have you?
Now, of course, it's my perspective on it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so, for example, with the two friends we were just walking around and went to the market earlier, we were talking about this propensity for, and it's not the only one, but it's an easy example because I'm right here, because it's a Paris example.
Mhm.
And it's not only Paris, but Paris is particularly strong at that. At having so the French already have a reputation for being a bit arrogant and
Okay.
pretentious.
Okay.
And they are, not always, depending, but you know. And then Paris, compared to the rest of France, and that's similar to
Mm.
kind of London to the rest, has a
Mm.
capital thing of like, we're better than the rest. And you guys are just like, you know, we can just hang out in your fields and don't have a kind of thing. And then you have the top, which is like the elite of Paris, you know, whether like aristocrat origin,
Like,
noble
or
leading, coming from
go
a
to
good,
certain schools, go to
wealthy,
certain
yeah, to
universities.
the
Right,
best
okay.
schools, and the people who've been to the best schools, they're better than everybody else internationally, even though they've never actually really interacted with many other people outside their own circle. But you talk to them and you like, they are absolutely sure that they're the best of the best of the best, and everything and everybody else is crap. And when
Wow.
me or the other people who were listening to listen to this with an international opinion, and they're like, and we're like, nobody else in the world has heard of that school. You realize that, right? And that we also have like really good schools in the US or in the UK that are like the same kind of level.
Yeah, yeah.
You get that? They're like, they're mystified. They don't understand.
Really?
They understand
Really?
intellectually, right? They're very smart people.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But that's not how they act and how they talk.
Yeah, yeah. So what they say is different from how they are, like kind of
Yeah.
at
And you
the
would have
moment.
to
Yeah.
call them on it, but they still think that they're the best. Now, I'm
Wow.
not, maybe, and some of them are because they come out like of extremely smart, educated backgrounds, but their world is very small because you never walk out of it. So you're not enriched. It's like, and then you become like an organism that is like confined to a very tiny environment that is inadapted to the rest of the world, like a panda. Just does that animal doesn't not make sense. The only reason it's still alive is because it's cute and we keep it alive. It's a super weird animal from an evolutionary perspective. It just found itself a niche where they like spend 22 hours a day sleeping because the only thing they ever consume, even though they have a carnivore
It's
like
one, yeah, it's one
bamboo, which
diet
is
thing.
like
Bamboo, yeah.
it doesn't have any nutrients at all. It's like, so they spend all their time like digesting the bamboo to pull out the very few nutrients it has out of it. And they have all sorts of weird oddities about the way they evolved, and that's why like most of them have died out, but we keep a bunch of them alive because they're cute. And now I'm
Wow.
exaggerating, but not
Yeah,
massively, because
yeah.
I went, that was a long time ago, but I went to the panda breeding center and sort of have zoo in Chengdu in China, which is there's the most pandas in the world and where they live. And I read a lot about, the more I read about the panda's evolution and all their different weirdnesses, and I'm like, this is so weird that this animal like still exists at all. It should have
Mm,
just gone extinct because it's just like in
mm.
a weird, they like that animal as a kingdom decided some weird stuff from an evolutionary standpoint. Like, oh yeah, we're going to eat this thing and only eat that we can't get any nutrients from, and it takes us hours to digest, and we only sleep on it. So you sleep 20 hours a day, you're like, you know, just vulnerable to all sorts of other predators,
Mm,
everything else going on. So
mm,
you close off your world, you're vulnerable. Where there's somebody who's exposed to a lot of different types of cultures and people is stronger for it.
mm.
And then we can solve more complex problems,
This is this.
which is another bigger problem of what we got going on in bubbles that are created for with social media, with
That's
society,
exactly what I was about to say.
inequalities. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, you like give your own version of that.
yeah. So it goes back to everything I was reading in the Shallows about, and I think we talked about it. Like,
A little bit. I'm sure they'll
or
come back
maybe
more because there's a
I
lot
don't
of
know
it
who I
going
talked
on.
about this. I said it to a few people, but with the internet, yeah, it was you and I. The internet surface is what's most popular. So you're not
Oh yeah,
sitting
we
in a
did talk about that.
library
Yeah,
going around looking at bits of
yeah,
paper and photocopying it and diversifying your ideas to
yes,
create a richer understanding.
yeah. And one thing
So,
I hate, for example, about, so this is interesting. I told you how I'm supporting my students, and it's a French school, even though it's an English speaking program.
mhm.
So the way they think, and I'm not even exactly sure on what's going on. I'm trying to adapt as best I can, but I'm changing what I can as well, because I believe it needs to change. The French way, I don't know if it's the only way. I'm sure there are other similar stuff elsewhere.
Mhm.
But for example, you were talking about exams earlier. There's
Mhm.
one of the ways that in which France, the exam is given. The exam is given in a broad term question,
Okay.
except there is a particular way to answer that question. It's not open to whatever you think.
No, you told me this.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember I mentioned that before. So if you don't know, so it's because of that, then like you're structuring and codifying those things, even though you're not sharing what the code is.
Yep.
But it means you're also limiting the amount of thinking that people are capable of. You're not teaching people how to think until they get to a certain level, like which is super high, like maybe masters or more. I'm not sure. Um, so the way that people are taught to think is rote,
Mm.
or it's trial and error most of the time, because we need to figure out, like, the students are either taught by, like, they have the right kind of environment, whether it's money related or not, but the teacher,
Mhm.
like their parents know, so they teach them, or they get
Mhm.
tutors, or they get special classes to train them on how to take those tests or how to answer those questions, because there is a way. um, but teachers don't usually spend time teaching what the way is. They teach the content. They
Wow.
teach the methodology, but not the content. They teach the content,
The
not the
content of
methodology.
the. I
I
noticed that
think this is the impression I'm getting from a lot of different kinds of environment. Now, I like to think about things, and this is where I come from a professional standpoint, which is what we were talking about at the beginning, is
Mm.
take the problem in turn, and then
Yeah.
think about what the references are and everything. Don't go with a rote typical, just, codified structure. Go with a structure that is relevant to the question at hand, and that you have to invent it. Yes, but it takes more work, but it's
Yes.
better thinking.
This is something I struggle with, partly with my students and partly with my colleagues.
Yeah.
So we have to get our students through the exam. So the one of the things I'll say to my students is plan what you're going to say before you start writing it, because if you're trying to think and write at the same time, it's too hard. So they end up with this mishmash of ideas that's utterly incoherent. But nobody teaches them how to take apart a question very quickly, plan it, think about what you're going to do, and then write it. I do.
So I've been taking some extra time to do things like that. That's why I've been taking that extra time with the students.
Mm.
Yeah,
The other thing that
I
that
could
I
afford
find,
to, but normally I wouldn't have time to do that. And I guess most teachers don't have time, which raises the question of what is this all for and about?
well,
I might have to
exactly.
turn my light on. My light is behind. I'm in the dark. Anyway, I'll just like go darker in my
We'll
vampire
see. We'll
state here.
see. And then, but the other side of it is that teachers will teach like a specific way of answering a question, like a framework, like point, evidence, example, or what. There's so many, right? And it works to a certain degree, but
Hmm.
it exactly like you're saying, it limits the thinking because they think, oh, if I do everything this way, then I'm going to get the marks. And then that someone might follow. I've had this happen quite a few times where
Yeah.
I've been handed a piece of work, I've marked it, and then the first thing they say is, but I followed the structure, so I should get the marks. I'm like, no, because what you wrote was terrible. Because it just like it's terrible. Not because you follow the structure, but there's nothing, there's no zing, there's nothing, it doesn't answer the question. And then they just want to know, so what do I need to do to increase my mark? Which kills the joy of actually going on a tangent and exploring something.
And that is a constant kind of like, what's it called when you're pulling the rope one side or another, between
A tug
order
of
and
war, tug
chaos
of
and
war.
structure, and
Yeah.
because you do need to have some structure to codify and understand what it is and share it and teach it, which is like what I'm in the middle of because I'm a new teacher. So which
Mm.
is great because it forces me to think about a lot of common notions that are common for me now with a lot of experience in my job, but that are like that a lot of people getting into the job and even more so starting to study get into. And but yeah, it's a very interesting question. It's and I was going to give another element to the question to turn back to
Sure.
the
Yeah,
original
yeah.
one. It also, to get to understand somebody better, it takes some being vulnerable and open.
Good point.
And we didn't mention that particular point before. So I would imagine, and I don't know for sure, that the person asking the question, like, can I get to work with that person better when we have nothing in common, etc., didn't come to the point where they said, well, listen, I'm sorry, I don't know how to work with you. I feel like we're not connecting. I'm not sure if it's me or what's going on, but it's not how I'm used to. How is it for you? Like, what's going on there?
Now that, of course, requires a high degree of self-awareness.
Yes.
And ownership.
It requires a high degree of self-awareness. It requires a high degree of being open and vulnerable to, and because maybe the person's going to like lash out. You never know. You don't know. It's the person. You're opening yourself up to say, listen, I don't understand. Is there anything that happened? You could turn around the person and say, yeah, I hate your breath. I hate your guts. And you're like, whoa, okay, this was intense. And you could take that personally.
Yeah.
Except that it's not personal. Now, take a mint, but it's not personal. And it's difficult not to take things personally, particularly if they're told to you personally.
Yes.
But that also gives us a full circle back to whose problem is this?
Yes.
So the person not liking you is not your problem. Now, that's why it's not personal. Or the person saying you have bad breath is not really your problem. However, you could totally help them solve the problem for them because you have a vested interest really in having a good breath, even though it's not your immediate problem. So you take a mint. Also, it's kind of like being nice, diplomatic, and makes things work a little bit better. You're like, all right, well, of course it's embarrassing. I don't like, it happened to me. I remember I was at a conference a year or two ago. Somebody told me like, have bad breath, you should take a mint. It's embarrassing.
Wow. Good on them for saying something.
But the whole point was it was about being open and honest to say, like, to tell me so that I can they expressed their thing about there's a problem, and it had allowed me to solve something that I didn't realize was a problem. So up until the moment I was told, it was not a problem for me because I don't smell my breath at the most of the time unless I'm wearing a mask like these days, which like forces me to take it.
It might have taken something for them to tell you as well.
Exactly. Just like it takes somebody, for me, if I'm eating with someone and I'm like, do you have salad stuck between your teeth? But I would like, and then I think, well, wait a minute. I don't want to tell them, but then they might spend the rest of the day and a lot of other people are going to look at them when they have salad stuck in their teeth. That's not cool because I know I could solve it for them now.
And then you'd hope
that's where I go with that kind of
you.
thinking. Maybe, but maybe not. I want to be like talking about integrity, like that kind of, I want to be the kind of person that would certainly say so. And if you do it with, consider telling somebody they have bad breath or a salad stuck in their teeth to be practiced for bigger, more important things.
That's great.
Because there's going to be other sentiments of things that are more dramatic, relationships, romantic relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend. Those are a lot harder hitting on the personal side of things. Or your schoolwork, your grades, because that happens as well. All of that is harder hitting to go and ask what happened there. But if you can do it with something
little, it gets easier to do the bigger stuff.
Maybe.
I think it does. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Or sometimes maybe it can be easier in a work situation than a personal situation.
Yeah. And as long as you're not sharing it with somebody else, it's only like in your head and you don't really know what's going on with the other person. Or you escalate quickly to doing personal stuff that go into some kind of argument or disagreement. Because what happens in those kinds of situations, and this is where this question leads, is you get annoyed. And you get annoyed with this person. In my head, I've tried everything. I've tried to see what kind of music we have in common, how you like to work, whether we have similar backgrounds, and it's nothing. But I've tried that oh, what's your background? That person, on the other hand, could have a completely different experience. Again, like back to the beginning on what we have in our heads and what we have in our heads to say, it's not the other thing that they have in their heads. another person. So you want to take efforts, to your point about understanding 7 habits of highly successful people, is
Effective, not successful.
effective. No, the understanding, sorry, was nonviolent communication point.
Yeah, that's that
Sorry.
as well.
Asking questions to understand their world and opening yourself up, which also takes, well, we said takes a high degree of self-awareness. Well, it can be, well, it's dangerous because you're vulnerable. You could get hurt, but it can also be building a bridge to somebody else, because the other person will get that you're being vulnerable and open, and it gives them an opportunity to be open.
So I want to ask a different question.
Yeah, sure.
That relates to this. How much do you think traveling around the world and living in different places has enabled you to be able to get on with people who at face value wouldn't be the kind of person you'd be with?
I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to quantify. I'm sure it has. Now, how much of that is nature versus nurture and events? I don't know. But I mean, I think it definitely helped in the same way that you say, like, being in an environment where a lot of people were different from me, it just encouraged me to do that. Now, is it consistent with the fact that I wanted to go travel and meet a lot of other people? Is it because I met a lot of people at the beginning when I was young and international? Perhaps, quite possibly, quite strongly, just a strong possibility. How much of that is my natural personality? Probably some, I don't know. But I would say that's part of the reason why I encourage people to travel, but I have traveled a lot, so I'm biased in that sense. But it is similar to traveling is taking yourself. So, I mean, you can travel, you don't have to travel and put yourself in a place where you're with a lot of different people. And in which case you get the kind of experience that you were sharing that was your life, growing up as a brown person with a lot of white people around where you're not like them. They don't even realize. I was actually talking with another person who a friend of mine, who was talking about, and we talked about this a little bit in these calls occasionally, I think, about there being a class difference. So for some people, there's a law being passed in the moment in France about global security that is making international news and there's concern internationally, well, in France as well, a lot. There was people demonstrating yesterday. I didn't know, I would have gone anyway. I didn't realize. About just basically racism in France, just tons of it. There's tons of racism. And French has a particular definition to secularism. So the French president is protecting the fact that he's got his global security law and saying and everything going on in France right now has nothing to do with racism. It's our own definition of secularism. But for me, the French definition of secularism, or the way that, not the original definition, but the way it is put in action these days, is a way to hide a lot of inherent deep racism. So just as a preamble to talk about the fact that my friend was saying that she realized that nobody was being racist towards her because people where she was working were mostly white people of a certain class. She realized that the people didn't know how to place her in what box. And after evaluating her, just through questions and stuff, unconsciously, right? They realized, because they're foreigner, this person is like highly educated, comes from a certain class background, so we belong in the same group. The color of skin is irrelevant.
I totally relate. Yeah. And in some ways, class can be more of a divide than anything. But that moment of where, and the kids, when pupils do it, because one of my classes asked me last week, like, where are you from? I was like, it's kind of a story I'm not going to tell you just yet. And I do usually tell them, but it's very funny when colleagues are like, so, and I know that look. I know the look that I'm getting because they're like, yeah, but you sound like this, but you look like this. What's going on? And it's very funny. And I like to dwell in the gaps. I deliberately like to hang out in the gaps.
Yeah, I love that too. That's why we have these kinds of conversations. I love the behind the scenes. What is going on, really? So to answer your question, absolutely traveling and putting yourself in other situations, but it's traveling where you put yourselves in different environments, different people, different stuff, not traveling to be with the same people, which you can do. And it's not traveling with your group of friends, staying entirely with the same, which is cool. It's a holiday, it's different. But it's putting yourself in a situation where you're not with the same group of people, not with the same social class, not with the same references, and learning to work with them. And yes, I believe traveling and living in different places has helped me with that.
And maybe the experience of taking the course that you're teaching, the experience of doing the masters, is part of what they're learning. Is that getting exposed to
I'm like growing as my own job and as a person with this whole thing. It's incredibly invaluable, I think.
What are you getting? What's so useful?
I'm
about
not sure, but that's like, it's almost time. So I think it's a topic for another time.
It might be. I feel like I should put my light on.
I feel like I should do something too, but I'm going to be backlit. All right, wait.
And then we can round off. Yeah, that's better. We can kind of see. Oh. You look less pale, put it that way.
I should have done that before. But hey, you see, this camera is really good. Even though there's the light there, I'm still all right. You can see me.
Yeah, you are.
It's a bit weird. Like, this is just a normal lamp. There's nothing crazy going on there.
There's an alien that's beaming itself into the corner there.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a very pasty white for a while.
So let's round it off. So
yes, let's round it off. What have we said?
This is a really interesting question as well.
It's a very good question. You'll have to type it over to me in message afterwards before I publish this whole thing.
Yeah, it goes to the heart of problem solving, but also who.
Yeah.
Your whole thing about who, understanding the people around you to better solve the problems that we're dealing with together.
And we could talk about this in a whole other host of ways about not taking things personally and emotional attachment and relationships. So there's a lot of different directions we can still go in, but I think we've done a good job of rounding this one.
Yeah, I think it comes down to being willing to look at things from someone else's point of view and consider that you might be wrong.
Yeah, look at you going on with the profound things that was said. The profound things said in this episode. That is yours. That's you. Thank you.
Maybe it's because it's the afternoon.
So you're saying I'm less insightful in the afternoon? Don't go there. See, so this is an opportunity. I'm saying that to myself. Don't go there. An opportunity to for me to not take this personally.
Yeah, you shouldn't. And if you're watching, subscribe to Willem's channel. Like, there's a button. Is there a button?
Yes, subscribe to the channel. We should say that at the beginning because I don't think most people will watch for a whole hour. I need to do a lot more of doing my own job with my own self. I am going to have more time in the past next week. I've been super busy, like end of September and October, with my classes.
Yeah,
preparing, giving classes, etc. And also do
you know, teaching is it really does push you in a way that no other career does. I think there are things.
What's really tough is to be able to now spend time. And I understand. I was talking to another friend who's has some academic background, and university teachers or researchers. Many of them were tenured or whatever. They don't want to have at all contacts with the students.
Yeah, because they want to do their own research.
Well, it's not rewarded. It is absolutely not rewarded in their career.
Yeah.
And they don't want to deal with other people's problems. They want to deal with the problems they want to research.
Yeah.
Et cetera, which I think is messed up because then, like, what do you it's just that. Well, that's a really good example of something where there's a weak correlation between the environment, what's going on, the problem that seems to be the problem to be solved, and the other problem, the interest of the other person. So, and that deep focus explains that very well. He's like, and the reward for growing the career as a university professor is producing papers that are cited by many peers. And he says, yeah, I also care for my students because it's my personal choice. It's not because it's valued in his career, which is crazy. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. Yeah.
But yeah,
I want to talk sometime about how you grade as well. We mentioned that. I started grading. Very interesting.
Yeah, it is.
France has a general culture of grading low. So getting the average is a huge challenge. That's the challenge, getting the average.
Okay.
Whereas, so I think from a ideology perspective, if you will, that if I'm grading for the average, that's all I'm ever going to get. Whereas if I grade on the full scale, I can encourage people to improve, aiming for like better and excellence, aiming for greatness rather than aiming for average. So my take on it, I think, is to grade high or higher than the French norm would go.
Okay.
So like, would you give an A if it's deserved?
Yeah.
Right. The French wouldn't.
Yeah. But
because it's never deserved, because the whole culture is C is good.
I see. Okay. But my whole thing is I've built a culture for myself where
That's what I'm doing as well.
and I'm known as a harsh marker. And like,
I don't know if I will be known as a harsh marker or not, but I will be known, because I know that some other people in my other class were disappointed with their grades. But similarly to the feedback you gave earlier, they thought they'd covered all the marks, and I was like, no, you didn't do what I asked you to.
Yeah. And I
didn't give them bad grade. I was just like, it was, you know.
The quick answer to that is, as long as they get quality feedback, it doesn't matter. They could do terribly, but if you give them one thing that they can do that's going to move them forward.
That was also interesting, because I don't have any other sources. I asked my students, another class, I asked them, so wait a minute, because there's like the marking thing, which is the software you just like put in stuff. I was like, so do the other teachers give you feedback, or you just get the numbers? They're like, no, we literally just get the numbers.
Get numbers, no feedback.
Like, you're the only person who gives us any kind of feedback, and who has some kind of a human interaction with us. I was like, oh, okay.
The other thing
exaggerating on the human interaction, but
the other thing that I do is I write, and I did this last week. We came up with a question. I wrote an answer at the same time as my class.
Yeah, I did that.
After planning it. And then they're like, holy, like, how do you do that? And I got into this whole argument with one class who were my favorite class last year, and now they're kind of my most frustrating class this year. They were looking at my paragraph, and I'd written 3 sentences, like, and it wasn't a lot, but it was the points built on each other and answered the question. And this one student was like, but how can you have written that? How does that even link to the question? You need to give more depth. I'm like, no, because this point references this, which means this. And they were like, yeah, but you need to go into more depth. And I said, well, I've explained this, and it links to this, and it links to this. That's how it works. And I've done it in that. And then I made the font bigger to make it look like more. And one of them was like, oh, okay, yeah, that looks like a lot now.
That's awesome.
I wrote it in 11 point, and he'd written his answer in 14 point. When I put it in 14 point, he was like, oh, okay, yeah, I was like, it's completely ridiculous. I realized that I'm writing so concisely it's very tight and very tightly linked to the question. They're not used to seeing that.
No, and like, for example, that personal research that the students need to do. Next week, I have calls with them. They need to have 8 pages written, and by the end, it's 24 pages, which I think is just asking for a number of pages written forces you to do quantity.
Yeah, it does.
So to do quality and to learn quality, you do need to practice quantity. That's fine, right? That's true. But do I really need 24? So you're just like, I'm sure I'm necessarily going to get drivel.
Yeah.
You need filler paragraphs for stuff, and this is where I have no experience on the French academic side of things, because like they give them instructions, and I'm grading them from A to Z on this. So I don't like, I'm making my own way to do it.
That's genuinely,
and I'm particularly making it a English speaking thinking way to do things. Because they have a lot of stuff that is translated from French and translated from French academic ideas. And as long as so if I have to prepare them for something else where there's going to be French people grading them, I need to make sure what is expected so that I'm preparing for that as much as I can. If I'm doing it the whole way through, then I can just teach them whatever I think is the right thing. I think as long as nobody nobody gave me instructions not to anyway. So.
Okay. We should have a conversation about that.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
sorry
As
we went on
ever.
a tangent at the end. Sorry.
That's all right. That's what
I
it's
think
about.
it's all right. Subscribe to the channel, like it, ask us questions.
Yeah, give us more questions. Thank you.
All right, cool.